You know, when we think about power, we usually picture something really obvious, right? A king on a throne, a police officer making an arrest. But what if the most powerful form of control isn't something we see at all? What if it's working behind the scenes, shaping how we think, what we believe is true, and even what we want? That's what we're going to get into today, the unseen strings of power.
So, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to challenge the whole idea that power is just about force. Then, we'll look at what this social power is actually built on. From there, we'll see how controlling the conversation is absolutely key. Then, we'll dig into ideology, how all this control starts to feel normal. And finally, we'll bring it all home and see how this stuff plays out in your everyday life.
All right, so let's start by questioning what we think we know. Is power really just about making someone do something? Well, the perspective we're exploring suggests that's just scratching the surface. See, the most effective, most durable kind of power isn't about controlling what people do, it's about shaping how they think.
And this slide really puts it into perspective. On the one hand, you've got direct power. That's the obvious stuff: force, threats, coercion. It's loud, it's visible, and people tend to fight back against it. But on the other side, that's where things get interesting. Mental control. This is the power of persuasion, of controlling the flow of information and shaping what people believe is true long before they ever make a choice. This is where the real action is.
This leads us to a much sharper idea called social power. It's when one group can limit what another group does, not by putting up a wall, but by getting inside their heads. It's about influencing their plans, their beliefs, and even their wants and desires. So it's not about stopping you from opening a door. It's about making sure the thought of opening that door never even occurs to you.
Okay, so if this power works on the mind, where does it come from? It's not just some kind of magic spell. This control has to be built on something solid, something real. It requires a foundation of resources that, critically, are not shared equally. Let's see what those are.
And that right there is the fundamental principle. Power isn't just a personality trait. It grows out of having special access to things that society values. The moment those resources are spread unevenly, a power dynamic is created.
So what are these resources? Well, they're exactly what you'd probably guess. Things like wealth, which can buy almost anything, including influence, having a high-ranking position or formal authority, social status, possessing knowledge or expertise that others need. And sometimes it's as simple as belonging to a privileged group in society. The more of these you have, the better your position to shape the conversation.
So how do people with these resources actually put them to use? The number one tool in the toolbox is controlling discourse. And discourse is just a fancy word for all the ways we communicate. The news we read, the laws that are written, the stuff taught in schools. It's the entire public conversation that defines our reality.
This quote from Toon A. Van Dyke absolutely nails it. He asks the key questions. Who gets to speak, and who is expected to just listen? Who gets the microphone, the TV camera, the front page? Who controls the official channels of communication? The answers to these questions tell you where the power is.
This table breaks it down so clearly. You've basically got two roles. First, the active speakers. These are the elites, politicians, CEOs, media owners. They're the ones producing the formal discourse. They write the reports, pass the laws, and own the news stations. And then you have the passive recipients. That's most of us. Our primary role is to consume all that discourse. We talk freely in our private lives, sure, but in the big, formal public square, we're usually the audience.
So this raises a really big question. Why is this setup so widely accepted? Why doesn't this massive imbalance feel wrong? The answer is a powerful, invisible framework holding it all in place. And that framework is called ideology.
Now, when you hear ideology, you might think of some rigid political system. But here, it means something much deeper, much more personal. It's the collection of basic, shared beliefs a group has about how the world works. It's the mental software that processes everything we see and hear. And it makes the existing power structures seem totally normal, natural, just plain common sense.
And this ideology doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's constantly being built and reinforced in a cycle. Step 1. The elites use the institutions they control, like the media and schools, to produce messages that reflect their worldview. Step 2. The public takes in these messages, often without even thinking about it, until they seem like obvious truths. And Step 3. These so-called truths then justify the power of the elites, locking the whole system in place.
Here's a perfect real-world example. You ever see corporations or government agencies offering free educational materials to schools? They might seem helpful, but they are never neutral.
They're carefully crafted to present a version of reality that benefits the organization that made them, quietly shaping how the next generation sees the world.
Okay, so this is the really cool part. This isn't just some abstract theory. Once you know this framework, you start to see these power dynamics playing out absolutely everywhere, in places you'd never expect.
Right. We're not just talking about world leaders here. This is happening in your office, at the bank, when you talk to customer service, and definitely in the doctor's office. Let's zoom in on a couple of examples.
The doctor's office is a fantastic microcosm of this. Studies show that doctors interrupt patients way more often than the other way around. Their technical, biomedical voice often drowns out the patient's personal story, their life world voice. And think about the subtle cues. A doctor might call you by your first name, "Hi, Bob," but you're expected to call them doctor. That small detail constantly reinforces who has the authority and whose knowledge matters more in that room.
Okay, now let's scale up from a one-on-one conversation to one of the most powerful discourse machines on the planet, the news media.
The research points out something crucial. Minority groups often don't have good access to jobs in the media, which means they're not the ones telling their own stories. And so, when they are covered in the news, the stories often focus on negative themes: crime, immigration as a problem, or cultural clashes. When you repeat that framing over and over again, it builds a powerful us versus them mindset in society that supports the status quo.
But, and this is a really important but, this isn't a story of helpless victims. People and groups without power are almost never completely passive. They push back. They create their own media. They organize. They protest. They build their own counterarguments to challenge the mainstream story. Power is always a two-way street, even if one side of the street is a lot wider.
So, we've walked through the whole architecture, from the resources power is built on, to the control of conversation, to the ideology that makes it all seem normal. The only question left is the one for you. Now that you can see these unseen strings, how will that change how you hear the world? When you listen to a politician, read the news, or even just talk to your boss, what hidden dynamics are you going to notice now?